Staff Sergeant Cole Whitaker told his family not to make a fuss when he came home. No banners, no crowd, no big display, just a quiet ride from the airport and a night alone with his own bed. What he didn't know was that his mother had made exactly one phone call 3 days earlier, and that phone call had somehow reached over 400 people in a town of 6,000. When his truck turned on a main street, he expected an empty road. Instead, he found every single storefront lit up, every sidewalk lined 3 deep, and a silence that told him something was about to happen before he even understood what it was. This is the story of what happens when a soldier asks for nothing and an entire town decides to give him everything anyway. Cole Whitaker grew up in Millbrook, a small town of just under 6,000 people, the kind of place where the diner knew your order before you sat down, and the volunteer fire department doubled as half the town's social calendar. He played quarterback for Millbrook High, worked summers at his uncle's hardware store, and left for basic training this September after graduation with most of the town waving him off in the town square. Over the next 12 years, Cole did 3 deployments, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to a classified posting nobody in Millbrook ever got details about. Each time he came home between deployments, the town noticed him a little less, not out of indifference, but because life simply moved forward the way it does in small towns. Kids grew up, businesses changed hands, the diner got new booths. By his 4th, and what would become his final deployment, Cole was 30 years old, unmarried, and increasingly private about his service. He'd stopped talking much about what he'd seen, the way a lot of career soldiers eventually do. His mother, Diane, worried about him more with each passing tour. Not about his physical safety alone, but about the quiet that had settled into him, the sense that some part of her son came home a little more guarded every single time. 3 days before Cole's flight home, Diane got a call from Cole himself, his voice flat in the particular way it got when he was trying not to make something sound like a bigger deal than he wanted it to be. "I'm coming home Thursday," he said. "Please don't do anything. No party, no banner, nothing. I just want to come home quiet this time." Diane said okay. She meant it when she said it. But after she hung up the phone, she sat at her kitchen table for a long time, thinking about the last homecoming. Cole stepping off a bus 2 years earlier, looking around at an empty parking lot, forcing a smile for his mother alone, and driving home in near silence. She'd noticed something in his face that day that she'd never quite been able to shake since. Not disappointment exactly, more like the quiet confirmation of something he'd already expected. Diane called her sister first, mostly just to talk it through. Her sister worked at the Millbrook Community Bank, one of the most connected people in town by pure accident of profession. Diane explained Cole's request. Her sister listened, then said something that changed the next 3 days entirely. "Diane, he told you not to make a fuss. He didn't say the town couldn't." What happened over the following 72 hours became something Millbrook would talk about for years, though almost nobody involved considered what they were doing as anything more than a phone call, a text message, a quick conversation at the grocery store checkout. Diane's sister called the owner of the diner first, an old friend of the family who'd known Cole since he was in diapers. The diner owner didn't hesitate. He told 2 of his regular morning customers, both of whom happened to be on the volunteer fire department. By that evening, the fire department had unofficially decided to have a truck present, just in case, nobody quite admitting out loud that they were planning anything. The hardware store owner, Cole's old summer employer, heard about it from his wife, who'd heard about it from the diner. He offered his storefront window for a sign without being asked twice. The high school football coach, who'd coached Cole a decade earlier, mentioned it to his current team at practice. Within an hour, half the football team had volunteered to line Main Street after school, let out Thursday. Nobody organized this from the top down. There was no official planning committee, no city council meeting, no single person orchestrating the whole thing. It moved the way small-town news always does, sideways through checkout lines and church parking lots and text threads between people who'd known each other their whole lives, each person adding a small piece without any single one of them seeing the whole picture forming. By Wednesday night, Diane had lost track of how many people had reached out asking what time Cole's flight landed. She started to worry, quietly, that this had grown into something far bigger than her one phone call to her sister had ever intended. Thursday morning, Diane woke up to find her phone had received over 60 messages overnight. People confirming times, asking where to stand, offering to bring folding chairs for the elderly veterans from the VFW hall who wanted to be there but couldn't stand for long periods. She drove to pick Cole up from the regional airport nearly 90 minutes away, the whole drive spent in a strange, nervous silence, unsure whether she'd just allowed something wonderful to happen or something that would embarrass her son the exact way he'd specifically asked her not to. Cole came through the arrivals gate looking exactly like every homecoming before it. Duffel bag over one shoulder, uniform slightly rumpled from the flight, a tired but genuine smile for his mother. No expectation of anything beyond a quiet ride home. "Ready to go?" Diane asked, hugging him tightly, saying nothing about what was waiting 90 minutes away. "More than ready," Cole said. The drive back to Millbrook took just under 2 hours. Cole talked more than he usually did after a deployment. Small things, mostly questions about the diner's new booths, whether the high school football team was any good this year, whether his old room was still the way he'd left it. Diane answered everything normally, her heart pounding faster the closer they got to the town limits, wondering the entire time if she'd made a terrible mistake, if Cole would see the crowd and feel exposed rather than honored, ambushed rather than celebrated. As they crossed into Millbrook's town limits, Cole glanced idly out the window, still mid-sentence about something unrelated, and slowly stopped talking. Main Street was lined 3 or 4 people deep on both sides, stretching the entire quarter-mile length of downtown Millbrook. Every storefront had something in the window, flags, handwritten signs, red, white, and blue bunting that had clearly been dug out of storage closets that morning. The high school football team stood in full uniform along one stretch of sidewalk. The volunteer fire truck sat parked at the town square with its lights slowly rotating, silent but unmistakably present. A row of elderly veterans from the VFW hall sat in folding chairs near the front, several of them already standing despite instructions to stay seated. Cole went completely silent in the passenger seat. Diane slowed the truck to a crawl as they turned onto Main Street, and the moment the crowd registered whose truck it was, the street erupted, not with staged cheering, but with the specific, overwhelming noise of several hundred people who had genuinely been waiting, some of them for hours, just for this exact moment. Cole's hand found the door handle before Diane had even fully stopped the truck. He stepped out into a wall of sound, applause, whistles, someone's air horn, at least a dozen voices calling his name at once, and simply stood there for a long moment, one hand still on the truck door, visibly overwhelmed in a way his mother had never seen from him, not even during his hardest homecomings before. The high school football coach reached him first, pulling him into a firm handshake-turn hug. Then his old teammates, several now, with kids of their own, lifted onto their shoulders to see. Then the diner owner, then the hardware store owner, then person after person Cole hadn't seen in years, some he barely remembered, all of them there for the same simple reason. Because somewhere along an unplanned chain of phone calls and quiet conversations, an entire town had decided that this particular soldier deserved to know he'd been missed. The elderly veterans from the VFW hall waited near the back of the crowd, patient despite the chairs some of them had refused to use. When Cole finally reached them, working his way slowly down a receiving line that had formed without anyone organizing it, he stopped, straightened, and saluted each one individually, holding each salute several seconds longer than protocol required. One of the oldest veterans, a man in his 90s who'd served in Korea, gripped Cole's hand afterward and said simply, "Nobody did this for us. I'm glad they did it for you." Later that evening, after the crowd had finally dispersed and Cole sat on his mother's porch in the quiet he'd originally asked for, Diane asked him gently if he'd been upset that she hadn't listened to his request. Cole was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I asked for quiet because I didn't think anyone would actually show up if you tried," he said. "I've come home to empty airports enough times to stop expecting anything else. I wasn't trying to avoid a party. I was trying to avoid being let down again." Diane didn't have a response for that at first. She simply sat with him in the quiet he'd asked for in the first place, now finally meaning something different than it had 3 days earlier. Cole later admitted that what moved him most wasn't the size of the crowd, but the specific unglamorous details, The football players who'd stood in the sun after their own practice, the elderly veterans who'd refused their chairs, the diner owner who still remembered his order without asking. It wasn't a parade organized by strangers performing patriotism. It was a town, quietly and without any real coordination, deciding that a person who'd asked for nothing still deserved to be told he mattered. Word of Millbrook's homecoming spread beyond the town itself after a local news station picked up a short clip of the crowd's reaction, filmed by someone's phone from a store window. The story resonated far past Millbrook's own 6,000 residents. Comment sections filled with people from other small towns sharing their own stories of quiet, unplanned homecomings, and at least 2 other towns and neighboring counties began informal traditions of their own. Checking with military families before deployments ended to see if a similar gathering might be welcome. The Millbrook VFW Hall started keeping a standing list after that day, not of parades or events, but simply of names and expected homecoming dates, updated quietly whenever a local family heard word that someone was finally coming home. Cole still lives in Millbrook today, working alongside his old coach at the high school as an assistant coach for the football team he once played on. He says he still doesn't fully understand how one phone call from his mother to her sister turned into 400 people on Main Street. And he stopped trying to explain it as anything other than exactly what it was. A small town doing what small towns sometimes do best, quietly, without being asked, for someone who'd stopped expecting anyone would. I asked for quiet, Cole says now. And what I got instead was everyone reminding me I never actually had to ask. If this story moved you, remember, sometimes the people around us are far more ready to show up than we expect, if we simply let them. Subscribe to Quiet Heroes for more real stories about community, homecoming, and the quiet ways people choose to show they care. See you in the next one.